You cannot open up a club today and have 10-year-old treadmills or 20-year-old dumbbells. You just can't do that. The consumers are too smart. Gen Z and millennials coming in, wow, they're taking as the baby boomers are moving up, they're filling the vacuum. We've seen people building new clubs going a little less with cardio, probably 20 to 30% less, depending. Adding more free weight space, adding more turf area, open space, adding more half racks. I mean, if you ask me how many half racks, power racks I would put in a club, I don't think I would have anything less than 8.
Welcome to this week's episode of L.I.F.S, where we talk about the latest fitness industry trends. I'm Matthew Januszek, and I'm here with my co-host Mo. Mo, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm in Vegas, where it is hot but sunny. I think I had a resort, Matthew, that you've been at many times called the Cosmo.
I bet you must be absolutely roasting outside. So you've not probably ventured out of the hotel too
I
much.
have not. I'm going to be venturing out after this recording to a meeting, which is about 15 minutes away by car. I'm not walking, but last I checked, it was 101. Yeah.
Well, enjoy. Well, look, let's get into it. We've got a great episode today with a fabulous guest. I'm really looking to. This is sort of within my wheelhouse. So I'll let you do the introduction, Mo.
We are joined by someone who I think has seen the industry from basically every angle. Sal Pellegrino, the executive director of FISA and one of the most respected voices in fitness. Sal's career spans decades, from shaping strategy at Precor, and he was even there through the Peloton acquisition, to now leading the supplier side charge at FISA, which is a trade group at the center of a vendor and club collaboration. Really, really interesting concept. In this episode, we're going to touch on this market trend report, which they release. Sal will help us kind of decode some of the signals which are out there. Sal and I actually collaborate quite frequently on another advisory call that happens once in a quarter on this very, very topic. We're going to cover what's happening with equipment pricing, market segmentation, and how suppliers are adapting to new customer expectations. We're also going to touch on topics of the week, Matthew, which you and I have put together, including Tariffs, a company that we both know, which recently got acquired by another company that we know, the robust growth of the Planet Fitness stock, an acquisition which I was a part of, and one other final point around the digital convergence. So we've got a lot to cover. I think Sal's the perfect guest to have on this week, so let's get to it.
Hey, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, Matthew and Mohammed. I'm very excited about the discussion.
I thought a good place to start is FISA is a name that I've known for a long time. I was also had a relationship with FISA back in the UK when I think Rob Barker may have had something to do with it in the early days. I may be wrong, but his name seems to be connected on some level. So probably a good place to start is give us a little bit of an overview of the purpose and mission for FISA for those that don't know the organization.
Oh, great. Thank you, Matthew. FISA is called the Fitness Industry Suppliers Association. 25 years ago, a group of fitness suppliers were at a conference, and they were looking for some sort of alternative to a traditional trade show. So hence, they came up with this idea of FISA, which is a vendor-hosted event. Vendors pay X amount of dollars to FISA, and from that, we invite qualified buyers. So it's just 2.5 days of incredible engagement, 2.5 days of one-on-one meetings. Imagine speed dating. Everyone gets 19 or 20-minute meetings. And by the end of the 2.5 days, you have just created such a relationship, taken existing relationships to a new level, or created new friends and new relationships. And as a vendor, I probably had done FISA 17 or 18 times. And when the founder, David Dinnerman, retired a few years ago, the board of directors asked me if I'd be interested. And I said, oh my God, absolutely, because it was always my favorite event. So again, a great thing. Now, above and beyond, we do 3 events. We do FISA East, which is coming up in November. We do FISA West in February in California. And then we do a YMCA event, which is really interesting because I sold to the Ys in the early part of my career and kind of was more on the club side for years. And boy, oh boy, is that a great event. We just had it in May, and amazing, amazing thing. 2,700 YMCAs in the United States. So it's a big segment. If you're not selling to it, you really should focus on it. And then also we do a trend report. And then we just did a partnership with a company called Murphy Research. And we did on our website, FISANA.org, there's 5 reports that you can sign up for and send them out, and just great stuff. And I think we'll talk a little more in depth about that shortly. But anyway, so that's the little nickel tour on FISA.
I've never been to a FISA, so I think we need to change that.
Right. Oh yeah. No.
The next event.
Absolutely. I think that would be great, Mark.
One of the things that I was curious, and I know there's some sensitivity in terms of what you can share around this, but one of the things that I've been curious on is about this FISA Trend Report. I think I'd like you to probably start off with saying or explain to any people that are manufacturing, selling in fitness equipment, how they potentially get involved in this, and then second, what are some of the in the most recent ones outside of information that's not confidential, like what are you able to share about what sort of trends or things that maybe maybe that are misunderstood in terms of what's trending up and what's trending down, and what are some of the things that you're seeing within that recent research?
Well, it's interesting. You're going to laugh at this, but I do not get a copy of it. All right, because I'm not contributing. We it's very confidential. It's the suppliers that pay FISA dollars to run this report, and they submit data to a third party accounting firm, and it's a deep dive. And I know at Precor I'll be able to share some stuff from that perspective. I think it'll be interesting. But we participated at Precor every year since this thing started. It was wonderful to see market trends, market share. You could see where you are. Now, we were an elliptical company, and the trend report for us was important because all of a sudden we started selling treadmills a number of years ago, and we wanted to see where the heck we fit in. So from that standpoint, it was great. The other thing that we did is from product development standpoint, we could see what categories were growing. And way back when we were watching stair climbers, this is going back probably 15, 18 years ago, and we're watching a category grow. After 30 years, the category is growing at double digits. And we said, my God, we should start creating a stair climber. And because of that data, we were able to get the money from our parent company to fund a project to develop a Precor stepper. So that's a great example of the power of that trend report. Both the designers, the product development teams, the marketing people, as well as the sales managers at high level of the company. They're the ones that get it, and they're the ones that digest the report. And if you go on our website, there's a little discussion about it. But again, we keep it very tight. We keep it very, very, very tight. Now, I can, this other.
Come on. There must be some bits that you've gleaned about what's happening that you can share.
Well, I mean, I'll give you a few items like coming out of COVID since 2021 or whatever. But treadmills are still the big dog, right? And then I think strength has just been, which you're in the strength business, right? I mean, strength has just been going out of whack. I'm just stunned at how, and again, my opinion is, COVID, people started getting their cardio elsewhere, whether it be at home, whether it buying, a Peloton or some sort of other connected cardio product, or a treadmill, or started walking outside or doing outdoor running or whatever, or hiking. And so all of a sudden, but couldn't get as good a workout from a strength standpoint in your garage. So I think that fueled so much activity on the strength side. But then when you look at this Gen Z takeover, which I'm calling it since 2021, when the young Gen Zers, both male and female, especially female, they came to clubs in a big way, and obviously that created this big rush. And oh my God, I need more half racks. Oh my God, I need more, more benches and racks. I need more dumbbells. I need, So I think just based on what I see, and the discussions I have with a lot of very large, successful operators, you know, I think these are some generalizations that I think probably match that pretty well. But you know, we've seen people building new clubs going a little less with cardio, probably 20 to 30% less, depending. Adding more free weight space, adding more turf area, open space, adding more half racks. I mean, if you ask me how many half racks, power racks I would put in a club, I don't think I would have anything less than 8 because of the usage patterns. You know, from a cardio standpoint, treadmills are still the big dog. And then I think I've watched stair climbers just grow and grow and grow and grow. And from my observations, treadmills are number one. Stair climbing, the revolving staircase machine, is number two. And the bikes, upright recumbents, seem to stay the same, and ellipticals have flattened a bit. So I think that's it. And then obviously the manual cardio pieces, the air bikes, the manual treadmills, the rowers, the upper body ergometers, the cross country ski erg. I mean, all these things have been wildly popular coming out, and again, to support that whole turf area. So that, I think that ties into a quick generalization of what's happening on the strength side as well as on the cardio side.
How much of this, Sal, do you think is more of a reset of where consumers are? I mean, coming out of the pandemic, you and I have talked about this many times that consumers have changed. And I think even we've changed in a lot of ways. Yes, we've gone back to some of our regular routines, but in a lot of ways, even how we think about fitness and wellness has changed. Then you look at the explosion of high rocks, which also happened post pandemic. Again, that was there before the pandemic, but happened really the explosion of it happened post pandemic. The addition of turf areas has a lot to do with the growth of high rocks, I would say, and other events that are like that. Do you think that the category and the trends that you're seeing, is this more of a reset and then we're going to be kind of at this baseline for the next 10 years? Or do you think that consumer preferences, we're now at this time that they're going to, because of influencers and preferences, that every 3 years that clubs are going to really have to rethink and have to budget for either redistributing their equipment or changing the mix and so on. I'm just curious to get your thought.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. I have a 33-year-old daughter. Okay. And what she spends on fitness just blows me away. All right. She's got a fitness membership with I'm going to call it more of a functional CrossFit type of spot. Then she does Pilates one day a week. She does yoga on Fridays. I mean, I don't know what she spends on her fitness wallet. She'll never tell me, but I'm assuming it's around $400 a month. Okay. And, but it's all about the experience with her. And I think the influencers on social media, I mean, someone sent me a link last night on burpees. You know what I mean? It just cracked me up, and it was really funny because to me at my age that doesn't sound remotely fun to me at all. But if you have a really good fitness influencer and they're doing something, and then all of a sudden they're on their phone when they go to their gym, they open space, they're going to be doing that activity or that movement. So I think the influencers in social media, I think, had a lot to do with it. But boy, oh boy, I think we got this new inventory of new members, these younger members coming in now to the gym space. I think it's healthy as heck. These Gen Zs Gen Z and millennials coming in. Wow, they're taking as the baby boomers are moving up, they're filling the vacuum. So club operators got to be really dialed in to the demographics. And I'll go back to Murphy Research because I think they're doing a great job at understanding fitness behaviors. They have a great newsletter. It's free. I'd highly recommend that listeners check them out. murphyresearch.com. And but they have just a really good sense of fitness behaviors, and they break it down by the generations. And that's been a fascinating study for me, Mohammed.
One of the things that I wanted to sort of move on to is the, I guess, the macro pressures on equipment manufacturers, and I was actually going through an exercise just the other day, really looking at tracing back trends since the pandemic, and how everybody that's been in the manufacturing side has had to deal with the changing from predominantly consumer. So anybody that was supplying clubs made a pivot to providing things in the home. I guess everybody was forced to do that for survival. They then dealt with dealing with the factories opening back in the Far East, and for everybody's benefit, like pretty much even American-made products have probably got components or electronics and that are made in the Far East or affected what's happening in the Far East. So a lot of people have dealt with dealing with the factories being closed out there, reopening. We then had the container price increase, where some of the containers were almost like 10 to 12 times their typical rate. So everybody had challenges in getting goods from Asia into the USA, and that created this sort of, I guess, lumpy demand for products and made it very, very difficult to forecast. We then had the challenges in the Suez Canal for a period of time, where everything was put under pressure and delayed. And then recently, we've now got the tariff situation. And then to overlay on all of that, you've got this changing in consumer demand for product, which even you referenced the Murphy research about strength training, and have we now sort of reached the crest of the wave on that? So I think from a manufacturer, there's for the last sort of several years, there's been a huge amount of variation, fluctuation, and it's been very, very difficult to look forward and to say, well, where's my business going to be in 3 years' time because of all of these changes, and to try and figure out sort of what is solid ground that we can now build upon. So with that said, and I guess with you heading up the organization which represents fitness industry suppliers, like what are you seeing? Number one, if you could sort of summarize how you would explain the position for many of the manufacturers, and what are some of the, I guess, takeaways, positive insights, or any sort of ideas about kind of where that sector may be heading?
First of all, great summary of all of the tsunami of COVID aftermath. I forgot about the container costs going up from like $5,000 to $30,000. I forgot about that. But I'll tell you, I mean, this year it's all about the T word, the tariffs, right? I mean, man, oh man, I've had so many discussions with suppliers about that, and and I think the biggest issue is, how the hell do you forecast, right, when you don't know what the final tariff's going to be? I mean, I think that indecision, in April it's this, in May it's this, in July it's going to be this, we think, but so I would say that first of all, the tariffs are adding what, probably 9% to 25%, increase in cost that they didn't expect this in January or in fourth quarter when they were planning budgeting for this year. So that's the first thing is, you feel bad for the senior level people that have to do the budgeting for things. And then, we've seen people, kind of be a little proactive, raise their prices a little bit in fourth quarter, do it again in first quarter to try to, like 3%, 4%. And then and then I've seen people adding surcharges to the invoices, which, I mean, that is certainly not a fun conversation to have with the end user, right? Especially if you quoted them something earlier and it's changed. So those are really big challenges for people. So I think then when government gets involved in business, that we always hate that because they always tend to screw it up a little bit. But I think that's really, really difficult. And the other thing is if a supplier, I mean, if a vendor, manufacturer rather, if they know what their prices are now, but their distributors, I feel sorry for some of the distributors, especially smaller ones, because if they bought a container at X and then the tariff comes, I mean, they can't charge more money for the end user. So that may be a real tough balancing act with some of those. So those are just some thoughts that I have on it. But I just think tariffs are the big kind of tsunami that's hitting everybody this year.
And honestly, if you add the big T, as you call it, with tariffs and how dynamic that is, but then you add other pressures like other competitors from China, as an example. Now these factories, Sal, we talked about this, right? We go to FIBO, and a lot of factories that we've worked with are now exhibiting on their own. Now they don't have the user experience, the sales organization, the marketing muscle, and all the things. But if you're a vendor and you are or you are and you are strolling down FIBO or HFA, you're like, well, this is a third of the price, and it's the same manufacturer that makes this other product. Should I be looking at it? And of course, you might not always be thinking about everything else that kind of goes with the purchase. That's one. And then I would say technology and how disruptive technology has been. You have no idea how many conversations I've had with hardware companies to say, I'm just going to put a screen up. I'm just going to hire a freelancer to write the software. I mean, this is some very, very large companies that they don't think about the from a member perspective, the entire experience is on that screen. And you're going to, well, you'll have 20 engineers working on the hardware part. You're going to hire a freelancer from the outside to focus on the experience. And that's where they fall short. And when you look at some companies, I want to move on to this kind of related story, which is about active solutions, and which I know people in the industry knew that this was potentially coming, but it was finally announced that Active Solutions was recently foreclosed and shut down with its assets being acquired by Core Health and Fitness, who I believe we all know Brian and Bruno and the team very well. And I think this is a continuation of some of those macro headwinds that we were talking about here. Um, one, Sal, to you, any thoughts on what happened to Active, and what are some warning signs that both suppliers and vendors should be looking at as you're thinking about strategy for the next 6, 12
Right.
months?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, I didn't. I don't have a whole lot of information to share on that, and I'm assuming the PR department at Core can give you a heck of a lot more information than I can. But I think it's just and maybe it's a function of some of these smaller suppliers, and you get hit with the competitive issues, and you have market changes, and maybe they don't have enough money to go into product development to meet the rapid demands and the consumer behaviors. So maybe that's it. But that may have had something to do with it. But anyway, it's interesting. You got to be really small and profitable, and you got to be really nimble. You know what I mean? And you got to have cash flow, I guess, right? I mean, so it's to weather a storm when you get it. So I don't know what happened there, but I do. I don't like when people lose their jobs over something and things like that. But I'm happy that Core is picking up those assets, and I'm not sure if they're picking up people with it. But anyway, it's good to hear that they're stepping in.
Like you mentioned, the popularity of these turf spaces, which I think was I don't know too much about the Active business, but I know they did a lot with their functional frames and products. And I think it was an area that we were very involved in back probably 15 years ago, and it's an area that's hugely competitive now. And I think when you look at those types of products and the margins, and as you said, Mo, the competition from China, and I'm definitely seeing a slowdown in the amount of these turf spaces that are going out compared to previously. Like, I think there's a lot of focus. I think people are merging the strength half rack place spaces with some of these turf spaces, and I think they've taken on a slightly different form to probably what they had previously, which I think if you look at the competitiveness of it, and I would say the change of how some of these gyms are being designed, I think there's definitely a big shift going on, and it's a challenge for small suppliers to keep up with those types of changes, because to develop a product for a small company could take 12 months, and so if you don't really know where the market's going, it's difficult to predict what you should be investing in from a stock perspective, and then you add in, as you said recently, the challenges with tariffs, and you're probably bringing in low margin product where you paid a little bit more for the tariffs. It's tough business, I think.
And you find yourself completely upside down, and I think and the repercussions of that are felt throughout the entire supply chain, which is why look, I think a lot of companies, you want to be chasing the trends and you want to try to get ahead of it. So you are ahead. You, once the trend is taking off, you already have the product in line. I think the advice here is given what I would say is the shrinkage. And we talked about years ago that jet travel in the 50s shrunk the world. That's happening
Right.
to supply chain today, right? Supply chains are getting smaller and closer all the time, whether it is through local sources or whether it's China people, factories coming over here. You've got to be constant of that. So if you're a vendor and essentially if you are procuring product and you're designing product, you're shipping it to China, bringing it here, you've got to really focus on what's that value add that you bring, because that ultimately is what people are going to be paying for. And as we're looking at the evolution of equipment and we're looking at kind of how things are changing, I want to shift to our next story here, which is around Planet Fitness and really the stories behind their growth. They had record stock prices about 2 weeks ago. They've continued that growth. There seems to be no stopping to Planet Fitness. And Sal, you and I, in our other kind of forum, talk about this on a quarterly basis. And it almost seems like no matter what type of headwinds Planet Fitness hits or expects, they somehow navigate around it.
They amaze me. All right. I mean, I remember when Planet Fitness came into the scene, in the early 90s, they bought a couple of world gyms. I was in New York at the time. And I just say, let me get this straight. $10 a month, right? And everyone thought they were crazy, but boy, they were crazy as a fox, right? Sly as a fox. And how do you add 900,000 new members, open 190 clubs in 1 quarter? How the heck you do that? How do you hire 190 managers? Never mind all that. So they are the behemoth. But you know what? It's interesting. I'll give you an example. I have a very dear friend who has 2 Gold's gyms, and he competes with a Planet Fitness in each of his markets. They did a second club, a Planet, in their market. The first time they lost almost over 1,000 members. The second time they lost about 90. So I think operators got smarter, got better, and created a very different experience from, the old traditional circa 1997 health club of 6 circuits of machines and things, right? Just dynamic programming, incredible marketing, constant reinvesting. And so I think the people that survived COVID, those operators are damn good. I have a lot of respect for anyone that's in the club operators business. And I think my opinion is I'm bullish on fitness, always have been, but I'm really bullish on the club side because guess what? I mean, everything that I'm seeing, YMCA's are doing good, Planet's doing good, Lifetime's killing it, Garmin's up, right? Private equity is investing heavily in our business. So I think it's a great story on our industry.
What do you think, though? Like we've talked about Planet Fitness, and one of the things that you started to see is evolving their model. They're putting up their prices relatively recently. They're adding these premium features. So there's definitely innovation going on in there. And as you've said, you compared them to your Gold's Gym colleague who, when they came in the second time, clearly they'd adjusted their business and figured out who their audience was and probably improved what they're offering. You have experience with a number of different operators, in particular YMCA that we touched on earlier. What do you see with these successful models? Planet Fitness clearly in the HVLP, Gold's Gym maybe in the mid to premium. What are some of the things that you're seeing the gyms that are responding to these low cost operators doing that's helping them win? And maybe we start that question with the YMCAs, because I'm aware there's some extremely successful YMCAs out there. So give us a bit of an overview of that and things that people could probably take away to continue to think about when it comes to where they should be putting some of their energy going forward.
Planet did a couple of things that I thought were very, very interesting. They made the franchisees refresh their equipment every X number of years, where I think that taught our industry a good lesson. You cannot open up a club today and have 10-year-old treadmills or 20-year-old dumbbells. You just can't do that. The consumers are too smart, and they know. I mean, consumers know more about your product and the industry and program than most of your staff do, because they're so well educated because of technology. So that's one comment. YMCA's, think about Y's real quick. their strength is families. They're all about the families, and again, so know what you're really good at and then and focus on it. And so I think the Y market is very interesting, and their communication and their understanding of the community that they serve. That's my big takeaway. Getting back to the Y business now that we run a YMCA event, I have a tremendous amount of respect for them for what they do in their respective communities. I live outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and the YMCA Greater Charlotte has 15 or 16 locations. And they probably have 7 or 8 after school activity centers, for childcare, child watch. So they do so many good things, running pools for the city. They're doing all these great things, adult programming, getting third party reimbursement for healthy living programs. That's a big deal. And they're doing a good job with that. So I think there's some things we can learn from that business. And then as a club, as a traditional mid-market guy, boy, you got to have your ear to the grindstone. You got to have in terms of what's going on in your marketplace, and you really got to have good connection with your members. And I think that you have to really we are in a capital intensive business. You just have to reinvest every year. And the people that are very successful operators that I know, 2 things in common: own the real estate, and they always reinvest. And those are 2 things that I think that you always members see that, and they want to see profits being reinvested.
Well, Planet Fitness is a behemoth. And for vendors, if you win a Planet Fitness contract, that typically makes them your largest vendor, right? For ABC, they are ABC's largest customer. For
Sure.
Matrix, or Matrix's
Yeah.
largest customer. And there's a lot that goes into, from a sophistication perspective, in managing and servicing Planet Fitness, right? And I think if you're kind of fortunate enough to be a part of the family, they will challenge you, but they will also enable you to grow with them. But back to your point about the refreshes, yes, they refresh cardio equipment every 5 years at a minimum, and they refresh strength equipment every 7 years at a minimum. And then they do what's called a complete Planet Fitness remodel of a club every 10 years. And they've been very, very strict in following that. So to your point, Sal, when you look at clubs, and I remember a club, I grew up in northern New Jersey, and I used to go to a small local gym, and I don't think they've been remodeled in 30 years. That
Oh, yeah.
that gym is no longer there. But um, that is just not going to work anymore, especially when the alternative is $15 a month. And that's why too, when Planet Fitness had the price hike, it had almost no impact on acquisition for them. They just continued to grow. It had
Yeah.
little impact on churn. Yes, of course, they still have high churn numbers, but it did not accelerate the churn at all. And to the mid-market point, I agree. I think that they're in a tough spot, but they're also doing well. You look at the growth of Snap Fitness and Anytime Fitness and some other brands in the mid-market. I think they're leveraging technology to be able to do that, which I want to shift gears to go into our next topic, which this press release came out while we were recording, which was Forte and Echelon having an acquisition. So in other words, Echelon acquired Forte. And I do know a little bit about this particular one because, Matthew, you and I have spoken about this, but I did advise Forte on this deal to Echelon. So I'm excited for both companies. But again, you look at the why these acquisitions are happening for Echelon. It gave them the ability to sell into the mid-market. It gave them a new technology muscle in white label apps, which they didn't have. They're double clicking on content, which is really important, and it's giving them functionality. The key thing here is that it's bringing a relatively scaled home fitness connected company that has recently gone into commercial. And this just gives them more muscle and more flexibility to continue their growth into commercial. But Sal, have you been seeing Echelon attending FISA, getting more active in the commercial space? I assume they've had some conversations with you.
They were attending FISA for years, Echelon, and they did very well with it, because they were very smart to do that, and they, hey, they have great content. I looked at it, and then the last time I saw them at a conference, they had a whole line of strength products that they're developing, and I noticed that last March at a active aging event, and they had 4 or 5 strength pieces, which I was like, whoa, I had, so it's interesting to see how people are reinvesting in expanding their product lines and mixes. And I thought that was pretty fascinating that they did that. So no, you know, they have a great little brand, and you know, the experience I've used, you know, their rower, I've used their bike before, and it's pretty, you know, pretty great content. I always was impressed with that. And you know, my barometer being at Precor when Peloton bought Precor, you know, I bought a Peloton bike, and I was like, holy mackerel! I just couldn't believe, you know, the content that was available. And that to me, you know, being an old strength gym guy, you know, and a treadmill guy, you know, for 30 years in clubs, that was a wowzer for me to see that. And I think, you know, when you look at, you know, Core, iFit, you know, Echelon, and a number of other brands, they all have great content now. You know, it's not that's you know, that competition is out there, which I applaud everybody for spending money on. You know, it's content is king, right? So
Well, I was going to ask you that. Like, I won't say that you've been around for a while, Sal, but but you have. And I'm going back to your early days when you came in the industry, and I guess for me is to understand kind of where we are in relation to where we've come from. And you mentioned in the early days of Precor where suddenly you saw other products starting to trend, and so it was probably the treadmill and the elliptical and the you know, spin bikes and all these sort of things came up, and everybody adopted them, and there was this constant arms war. And then we seem to have gone through a period where from a lot of the traditional brands, it's reinventing or repositioning or repackaging things that have been out there for a long time. So, you know, a nicer looking strength line and a nicer looking a cardio line, and you put some small features on, but no massive reinvention. Even the step mill that you said, you know, that's been around forever. It's just
years. Yeah.
yeah, it's just come back in a slightly different form, and I guess the IP's done its term, and so everybody's coming out with one. But so I think looking at what happened years ago, seeing how we came to this level where there's not been a massive amount of innovation, but now we're starting to see companies like Echelon, companies like eGym, companies like iFit. Like, do you sort of see that there's this new breed of manufacturers that are entering the space, and that it's probably putting a lot of pressure on some of the existing guys to kind of rethink their model, but also these new companies may start to shape where we're going next. Just curious on how you see that based on, you know, your history and then bringing that into where we are today.
Before I get into the technology side of that, I have to share with you that in 1979, I opened up a Nautilus Fitness Center. Okay, it was high intensity strength training, right? Then after I had two clubs, I sold them to my landlords, and I started working for a startup called Stairmaster. So I was there 14 years. Then I went to Precor for 13 years, and the elliptical. So you had strength circuit, universal gym, you know, Nautilus training, a lot of the Cybex came on, all that. And then it went cardio crazy, right? And then Life Fitness came out with a treadmill, Quinton treadmill, you know, so you had strength, cardio explosion. And then CrossFit came along, and all of a sudden, I'm seeing women doing powerlifting movements that I hadn't seen since I was in college in the 70s, right? So when I walk into a gym today and seeing women doing deadlifts and squats and power cleans, it just cracks me up. I go, oh my God, 40 years, we've gone full circle, you know? So it's pretty interesting. But you know, when you think about the technology side of things, and you know, and I think it has to do with retention, right? And you know, you can look at Technogym, you can look at eGym, and everyone that has any of their technology circuits, and you know, the owner always says, "Hey, it's sticky for my members," and so I think that's an interesting piece for technology. And then now, you know, I mean, Mo, this is your world. This is your sweet spot. But being, you know, with an app connecting with this interface with the console, oh my God, you know, what a great experience for the user. And that's pretty darn powerful.
I think what's really evolved is you think about how you've learned, Sal. It's funny you talk about 1979. I was born in 1980, so I wasn't even around when. Just shows you how deep and long your incredible experience has been. But you think about what technology has done, and to me, when you look at even how, when Matthew and I were training in the 90s and 2000s, we got a lot of our knowledge from two sources. But I would say three. If you were an athlete, maybe your coach, your high school or collegiate gym. The second is the actual gym. By talking to people that looked big or looked fit, depending on what you were in, and you go talk to them, you see like what are you eating? What are you what circuit are you doing? What do you how many days a week you work out, rest days, all that. Then the third was magazines, right? Muscle and Fitness, Flex. I mean, these were like legendary. I still have so many of them in my attic, but that's when I learned about concepts like, Charles Poliquin and German volume training and all of the that's now been replaced by two things: influencers and technology. Now more increasingly AI. So now you look at we had three pillars, which was your high school gym coach and PE and all that, which doesn't exist anymore in a lot of cases. Your gym bros or gym girls that you would talk to, and then the magazines. Now all that's gone because no one would talk to the gym anymore because they have the headphones in. It's really about the I would say AI and content that they're getting from influencers. So technology has really changed the game. Hopefully, it's opened up more people. The other thing I'd add that technology's done is we can now focus on outcomes more, right? So now we're you'd have to wait maybe 3 months, or especially if you are mature in your training cycle, it might take you 6 months to see gains. You could now track incremental things because you've got a body pod, this human body pod, which I talk about, for $200, and you can see incremental changes in what's going on. And I think that could be helpful. Well, look, we're almost at time. Matthew, when we typically start these episodes, we kick it off with a personal story. You've been teasing me about something since last weekend. You've been talking about something that you want to tell me that you didn't tell me that you're going to wait for the podcast. So we kicked this podcast off. I made it through the whole episode without asking you about it. I want to ask you. So what is this thing that you saw someone and they told you that I'll be impressed by?
Deborah and I went to a place called Ascent in Newport Beach, and it was a lady that Deborah met, I believe, at the Dave Asprey Biohacking Summit, and she's got this. I guess you could call it a biohacking studio. I'm not sure whether that's a name that she would put on it, but it was very impressive. They've got everything from beamers to CVAC to what are the I forget the name now. What are the big tanks that you sit in? The
Hyperbaric chambers.
chambers. These PMF beds. Is every and they've got the biocharger as well that you and I sort of got involved with at Connected. So every device is in there, and she spent sort of over a decade looking and researching at all these different companies. So we went there, and one of the things that she started off with, which I'd definitely recommend, is just doing this assessment, body assessment. And I did. This is it. If for any of you that are watching it on video, you can now see a picture of the studio. Red light therapy as well, and she gave me some really interesting insights into this space. So hopefully we're going to go when you come down, Mo. We're going to go and do a interview at this place, because the way she's packaged it together, I certainly think it's we're going to see a lot more of this going forward. How it's implemented somewhere like a Planet Fitness, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there'll probably be a little bit more of a basic version. But I really could kind of see how a lot of what happens here can really relate to what you would want to do in the gym. And so she did an assessment with Deb and I before we started, and it looked at everything like muscle mass and body fat and protein in the muscles and minerals. It kind of gave a really a full overview of your body and how you're performing. And for me, it was quite interesting because one, I'd done a similar test probably in 2000 and then 2021. So the first thing I was really excited about is since I was 50 when I last did this test, I'd actually improved in terms of increasing muscle mass and reducing body fat. So I was pretty excited about the fact that as you get older, you can actually continue to improve. But the other thing I was impressed about is I think, when you go to gyms, although there are a number of different assessments that you have, I think the exciting thing about what I'd seen here is how some of the technology that's available. And I know, Mo, you've got some other sort of devices that provide this information that you're involved with. But I think providing some of this information about where you are and pairing that with some of the research about about muscle, just muscle alone and the importance of it, I think can really start to shape what a lot of the fitness industry are doing from a programming perspective, and then providing different channels that you can go down, whether that's exercise or whether that's other interventions, so that you've sort of got more of a holistic view on your health. And I'm not saying there aren't places out there that are doing this kind of stuff, but the traditional gym certainly is that you go in there and you exercise and maybe you do a sauna and a steam at the end and that's it. Whereas I think if, I kind of gave me a bit of a view on where the future of the fitness industry could be, where you're getting really, really good, meaningful assessments about some of those key parts that should be you should be paying a lot more attention to, and then providing you with a number of different treatments and therapies and exercise that can help to sort of optimize that depending on where you are. So yeah, that was my experience on Friday.
Well, that sounds incredible. I mean, look, in so many ways, it is replacing your annual doctor visit or your quarterly doctor visit, right? And not that you shouldn't do that, you should do that, but you should also encourage you to do it because I think doctors and it's interesting, Matthew, as you know, I think I talked about this 2 weeks ago. I went for my checkup, which I have not been to in a long time, and one of the feedback that I got from my blood work is to exercise more. Like that's what and I exercise about 10 hours a week. Exercise more.
But you should be exercising more. They were saying.
Thank you. I've been slacking.
Oh, really?
The second thing that it told me is that my BMI was too high and that I should go on a diet. Right. So again, healthcare is great because they can identify major issues, but they're only kind of seeing you at that very point. They don't understand how I got there. They don't know how much I work out or why I'm all the things. But then you kind of layer that on with something like a sun, which I do want to come try. So I might be there next week and maybe we could chat more about that offline. But it sounds incredible. And I think brands like eGym and Technogym, Sal, as you mentioned, they are incorporating some of these packages and some of these technologies into what they're doing. And I think we're going to see that happen more and more. So I agree. And you look at Crunch Fitness and Planet Fitness and premium gyms that are now offering more recovery features, whether it's cold plunges, I don't know about hyperbaric chambers, but certainly Normatec boots, red light therapy, cryo. You're seeing places now offer this at a premium, and sometimes they even tier these offerings out, but they're coming there. Are they doing the right things? Maybe not. Maybe they need to hire more experts who are in the industry to be able to influence that. But that's awesome. So good to see that. My takeaway, and I have a real simple one, is for no reason at all, I just didn't drink for like the last month. This was not planned or anything like that. So here in Vegas, yes, it's not like me. So I'm here in Vegas. So I went out for dinner and I had 2 glasses of red wine. It was a really nice cab. Look, I'm going to get 1 glass, and I got a second one. I'm pretty sure I walked back stumbling to my room after just 2 glasses of wine, and then I woke up this morning at 4:30 to work out to work out at 5, and I just felt horrible. And this is like, I mean, I know, Matthew, you go on and off, and you go for like long periods with not having any alcohol. Is that common where you come back and you've just lost the tolerance, or you just feel one drink?
Yeah, I was thinking about it last night. I'm exactly the same. I don't know whether it's because you become more conscious of how you feel without it, and then when you have it, that the pain is just almost like, is it really worth me doing this anymore? But or whether it's just as you get older, you don't process and deal with alcohol as well as what I did when I'm younger. I'm not sure, but I certainly, whenever I do it, I just like it's a big commitment to go out and have a few drinks because I'm just going to feel terrible the day after.
You feel terrible, so you wake up, you're feeling terrible. I make my way to the gym, and then I open up the Aura app, and my retina score is down the tank, right? So I'm like, oh, okay, now, so you even have that. So I'm not going to be drinking tonight, even though I'm going to go out to SDK for a great steak dinner. But anyways, that was my big takeaway of this week. Sal, so we like to wrap up our episodes with a key takeaway or insight. I know you don't want to give up much about the report, but anything else?
I'm gonna put my club operator's hat on.
Okay.
Be the wellness hub in your community. because we're talking about this, right? And I follow, and I'm assuming, Matthew, you know this gentleman, Alan Leach, who runs the Westwood clubs, and he's a great operator. He's a great marketer. If you operate a club, experience is the marketing. I love that statement. I like the way you put that. And master the art of asking questions. I mean, those are two things that I think every club operator can just apply and think and improve big time. And then really from our end, you know what we do at, at FISA. I mean, our goal is to help the industry, help the club operators meet with great suppliers who can really help them with their business. We always have we have great keynote speakers. We have roundtable discussions that are live. So again, it's this incredible experience of us just trying to do whatever we can to make both sides of the industry kind of rising tide raises all boats, and that's kind of my little closeout.
Well, Sal, thank you very much for joining us. We'll have to get you back again towards the end of the year to see if there's any new insights that you're able to share with us about what's happening on in your space. I've been to a number of FISA events, and I've had a great time. I would agree with everything that Sal says. He does a fantastic job. They're nice and small and personal, and they're definitely one of the best events that I've been to in the industry. And I'm not just saying that because he's on. I'm really impressed with what you guys do over there. And thanks again for sharing your knowledge. If anybody who's listening has enjoyed this episode, if you've got anything to say, if you've got any comments, then you can go onto our YouTube channel, or you can go into our LinkedIn page on under L.I.F.S and let us know if you've got any comments, questions. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And thank you, Sal, and thank you very much for listening.